Hey guys, welcome back. This is Library of Orthanc, LOTR TCG, back with another foil deck video for you here. I'm really excited about this one. This is probably the funnest, most exciting deck I've put together in recent memory. Isn't an original deck on my part by any means. This is copied from the Last Homely House forums, the Lothlorien forum where there's shared deck designs. And I have recently been dabbling into the expanded format and building decks for that. So it's a very rich format, very highly powered. I really like it. And so have a deck for you here today that was created by one of our members here. Shelobplayer is what he goes by on the Last Homely House forums. And I'm going to butcher his regular name, I'm sure, nor do I know if he wants me to share his real name. So this is created by our resident expanded expert Shelobplayer, and want to just go through this deck with you. So this is the Powerful Guide deck. He calls it Powerful Guide Revisited. So I just built this card for card based on that list in the forums, and I'd say this is my favorite expanded deck. I think it really shows some of the cool synergies that are possible in that format. And I've taken, nice care to put this together with all of the best versions of the cards. So when you play expanded, you can't do all foil because there's certain cards that are not available in foil. But every card that is able to be foiled, I have foiled, as well as anything that's a masterwork. I upgrade to the highest version of that, to the masterwork version. So hope you guys enjoy the deck. Even if you don't like the expanded format, hopefully you still enjoy listening this video and hearing some of the card interactions or seeing some of the cool cards. So hopefully it's still something that everyone can enjoy. So this is the Powerful Guide, and I'm going to start off. This might be a little longer video too, just because there's so much in-depth interactions with some of these cards in the expanded format, and I want to try to touch at least on some of that. So the first thing to show you here is the starting fellowship. So we do have Frodo, old Bilbo's heir, as the ring bearer, and you'll see why we're playing that, as we do have some specific synergies with Hobbit allies, and then I think one thing at least that uses the Frodo signet and some things that use Frodo. So this ring bearer actually has some really nice synergies. You usually see, I think the Resolute Hobbit is probably the most common one, just the 12 resistance Frodo, but this is easily worth playing in this deck because of the synergies you're going to see with that. So we've got old Bilbo's heir as our ring bearer. And then for our ring, we do have the Great Ring, and this is kind of a lot of times a no-brainer in the expanded format too, because this just says each time you are about to take a wound, you can add a burden instead, so you can just wear it in response. And then also for maneuver, you can't wear it in response. Maneuver, wear the one ring until the regroup phase. So what I meant to say is you can wear it just as a maneuver action with really no taking a burden, no anything like that to put it on, is what is how that works. And then you can always add a burden to make the ring bearer strength +3. So that's going to make it very difficult to overwhelm the ring bearer, because you can just pump yourself as many times as you can take burdens as you need to get +3/+3, however many times you need to do that. That's not limited in any way. So that's the ring that we choose to use with our Frodo. So I like that. I think those two look really cool together too, the heir with the ring. Then in terms of the rest of our starting fellowship, we do have a couple of guys that are also, well known in expanded format, which is Merry and Pippin. In the Bloom of Health is the subtitle on both of those. And the cool thing that these guys really do is they add 1 to the number of Ents you can spot. So basically these guys count as an Ent. Now the interesting thing too is they're still unbound hobbits. So they always also still count as an unbound hobbit. And you'll see where that synergizes here with the next card. And that is, we have Quickbeam Bregalad. This is the original Quickbeam from the Ents of Fangorn set. And his effect, you will see, is his Twilight cost is -1 for each Ent and Unbound Hobbit you can spot. So what you do basically is you count all the Ents, you count all the Unbound Hobbits, and you reduce his cost accordingly. Now, as we just saw, what we have here is 2 Ents and 2 Unbound Hobbits. So we get a -4 off of that. So Quickbeam, just with these 2 guys, is free. So far we've used up 2 counters on this. This uses up 0. And then the final member, or I shouldn't say the final member, we got 2 members left here. The next member of our starting fellowship is Erland, the Dale Counselor. And you'll see this deck is very strongly based on Gandalf events, and this guy allows you to take a Gandalf skirmish event from your discard pile into your hand every time you exert him. So that's really nice to replenish those Gandalf events. And then, of course, you can always burn this guy too with Save from the Fire and get some Gandalf cards out of your deck too. And last but not least, we have Smeagol, always helps. So he costs 0. He counts as Smeagol for cards that we're going to need to spot Smeagol for. And, there's some specific synergies with him in the deck as well. So let me just show you that lineup again. And this is, again, what's a little bit crazy about Expanded is that you can have some pretty robust starting fellowships. So none of these guys on their own are great cards, but you have, essentially you've got 6 people in your starting fellowship here, which is pretty crazy to have that kind of a start. So, Ringbearer, these guys just cost 1. He's free. He costs 2, and he's obviously 0. So that all adds up to your 4 that you're allowed to play. So that's the starting fellowship. Then go ahead and show you guys the rest of the Free People's cards. I forgot to mention too, because of the size of this video, I'm just going to only cover the Free People's side of this deck. I'll cover different expanded shadows in a different video, but this is only going to touch on the Free People's side of this deck. So the next thing we have is the Namesake card of the deck. We do have 2 copies of this, our nice Masterwork Powerful Guide here. So his requirement is to play spot 2 hobbits. Obviously, you've got your 2 hobbits down there. Important to also note is if somehow you lost one of your hobbits out of your starting fellowship, you do have hobbit allies in this deck, and those will still count as hobbits for the spotting requirement on this to play. And then his key effect is each time you play a spell, you may add a burden to wound a minion. So that is a pretty cool effect. Obviously, you want to have a mechanism to control the burdens, but provided that you're able to do that, you basically, every time you play a spell, you get a wound out of that. So that's fantastic, and that's what the deck's based around is playing some nice spells. And spell, again, is just an unloaded keyword that you'll see on event cards. And lastly, the final text of this is, at the start of each skirmish involving Gandalf, you may draw a card and then discard a card from your hand. So it's kind of like a skirmish phase muster where you're able to cycle through cards. So that's a nice ability too, just to keep the deck cycling. And this deck is able to use the graveyard too, or discard pile, excuse me, as well. So getting cards into your discard pile is not necessarily a bad thing at all. So we have our 2 copies there of the Powerful Guide. I should say too, one of the synergies that you'll see with playing 2 copies of this is just A, being able to get it sooner, and then B, if you need to place one of these out of play to replay it with Falls of Rauros, you are able to replay it then. You can feature the kind of sent back Gandalf tech with the condition sent back, but this version does not play that. So if you're really concerned about keeping your Gandalf on the table or worried about him dying, you can play Sent Back to make sure that you're able to play that too. But this current build just uses the second copy in the Falls of Rauros if you absolutely need to place one out of play to replay your second copy. Then your other key companion here from the Gandalf culture is Grimbeorn, the Beorning Chieftain, and he obviously is going to interact very favorably with his axe, which we'll look at in a bit. And his effect is every turn at the start of each turn you heal him, And then at the start of the maneuver phase, you can exert him twice and discard a minion to make him strength plus X until the regroup phase, where X is the minion's strength. So that can get just like out of hand, super fun and silly if you like discard a Sauron or something like that. But mostly you're just, discarding a big enough of a minion to, win whatever skirmishes you need, so that you can trigger those abilities that say, if you win a skirmish, do X. So we'll look at what those are as well. But definitely one of the cards that you go after when you do a Saved from the Fire burn is Grimbeorn and his Beorning Axe. Then we also have Radagast. Great card, of course, just in general for for triple moving, making the move limit +1. And then obviously the other thing is that he's an additional wizard. So some of your cards play on wizards, and then you don't need to have those go only on Gandalf. You can use them on Radagast as well and get some usage out of him by using those wizard cards on him. Then another fantastic skirmisher we have here is Treebeard, the Enraged Shepherd. And so to play him, you have to spot 3 companions, but he's crazy because every time he wins a skirmish, the first shadow player must exert X minions, where X is the difference between Treebeard's strength and the losing character's strength. So this is, again, some weird language about the first shadow player there. That's if you were playing multiplayer. You don't see that featured too much, that wording, but obviously your opponent is automatically the first shadow player in head-to-head. And what it's saying is when you beat them, let's say you beat a minion that is a 10 strength minion, well then they have to exert 2 minions because the difference was 12 to 10 and you were 2 over them, so they have to exert 2 minions. Now, obviously, what you can do is if you're playing some small scrubs, get a small scrub assigned on Treebeard, and then they're basically going to have to exert every minion. And then if we pump him up higher to get, Palando or something on him to increase his strength, that will help with those exertions as well. So that's Treebeard, the Enraged Shepherd from the Hunter's expansion. So that is our characters. You'll notice we had 6 in our starting fellowship and then an additional 4 here. That is a total of 10 companions. So you are not able to play all 10 unless you actually use Falls of Rauros to just place. I talked about the trick where you could use it to replay Gandalf. The other trick is just place any companion out of play and not replay them, but replay a different companion. So like, for example, you burn a Quickbeam and place him out of play, then he doesn't count as a companion in your dead pile because you've removed him from your dead pile, and then you can replace it with like a Treebeard or something that's going to be actually much more effective on the table for you. So that's the other trick that you can do with that Falls of Rauros. Now, the next bit of this deck we're going to go into is our allies. So as I mentioned, this deck is heavy on Gandalf events, so we're going to play this absolute staple of Expanded and of Gandalf decks, Barliman Butterbur, the Prancing Pony Proprietor. He is just absolutely fantastic because you can exert him to take an event into hand from your discard pile. So if you guys don't know specifically how that works, is you play him, you exert him, and then you can always just keep healing him every time you get another one. And what that does is give you another exertion to be able to use. And then interesting synergies with this, of course, is when you play to heal, you've got 1 on the table. When you play to heal, that goes to your discard pile. So if you have cards that get back Gandalf cards from your discard pile, you can get back more Barliman Butterburs. And why that's so good is Barliman actually becomes like a combo event of every event in your discard pile, because if you just take back any one Gandalf event, you can only use that as the specific printed event. But if you take back a Barliman Butterbur, your discard pile then is like having an option of any one of those events in your hand when you need it. So the versatility is huge for that. Couple other things to be aware of with Barliman. Obviously, he is an ally, and allies are characters. So you'll see with A Wizard Is Never Late later on, is able to pull Barliman Butterbur because he is a character. And so that's a synergy that you're going to want to obviously be aware of, is that it is pullable by that. So allies are characters. They go to the dead pile. They have types. So all of that stuff remains true with the ally rules. So we got 4 Barlimans. Then we have a Bounder. And this is basically a staple trick all the way back from Fellowship block, is old Bilbo's Heir plus Bounder. Frodo can just be overwhelmed as many times as you want, and you can just exert Bounder to prevent the overwhelming unless Frodo is tripled. So that's a huge synergy. This can also be used to keep your hobbits on the table if you actually want to keep your hobbits on the table. But I think a lot of times, you might just want to let them die to, threats or skirmishes or whatnot. But if you want to keep hobbits on the table, Bounder is your guy. Obviously, the one hobbit we know we want to keep on the table is old Bilbo's Heir. Then the last ally that we have here is the Gaffer, kind of a unique one, but this is just so that we can loop healing on Frodo, with Frodo heals the Gaffer, and then the Gaffer heals Frodo. So that way, basically, the net effect of that is Frodo heals himself every turn. So that's really what those 2 cards are interacting to do. And you'll see later on, like, why might we want to be healing Frodo? But that's the interaction there, is that they heal each other. So it's once per turn Frodo gets healed. So that is our allies. Then moving on to our followers. Now, followers, guys, if you're not as familiar with those rules, they work very differently than allies. They are not characters, so anything that asks for a character cannot get a follower. They don't have types, so they're not hobbits. Like Robin Smallborough here is not a hobbit. These are just followers. So they're treated, I guess, more similarly to like a condition, if you just think of them that way. They're not a character, don't have types, anything like that. But the first one here, we've got our nice Palando Far Traveling One masterwork here. I love the Gandalf masterwork and these quilted patterns that they have on it, and the foiling of the, fire stitching there is just beautiful. So, but Palando, game function wise, you pay aid 2 to transfer it to a companion. And, typically it's going to be to a Gandalf companion, because otherwise you have to exert twice. So you put this like on a Grimbeorn or a Treebeard, and then it makes them 1 higher power. But then also the key thing here is each time bearer wins a skirmish, you may discard a condition from play. So you can just start, whittling down the support area of your opponent's shadow conditions by winning skirmishes with Grimbeorn or Treebeard, typically is who you're going to look to put this on. Robin Smallborough, he's just there to cycle cards for you. So during the maneuver phase, you can attach him to a Shire companion and discard X to draw X. So he's just going to really help with cycling. And if you get a ton of minions in your hand, and you want free people cards, you can just pitch them all and really get your hand cycling. So that's a nice little trick to just keep yourself moving. And like I said, all it requires is a Shire companion, so you can still do that with your ring bearer even, so you'll always be able to use that. And he does increase the resistance of the character by 1 while he's on them, but that's, I think, pretty irrelevant. The power 1 is obviously a more relevant bonus. So those are our first 2 followers. Then our final follower, we do have 3 copies of Deagle, the Fateful Finder. He's a very nice staple as well. There's some interaction with the shadow side too, with placing this guy out of play, but we'll cover that when we cover like shadow defenses. But offensively, the synergy here is you have to spot Smeagol to be able to play him. So we do start Smeagol. And then it does cost a burden to get him attached. But then once he's attached, you can, if the person he's attached to is not assigned to a skirmish, so you can always put it on someone, resolve their skirmish, and then use this ability. But the ability is, if bearer is not assigned to a skirmish, discard for this from play to play an artifact or possession from your draw deck on bearer. So that literally lets you get any artifact, any possession. So very, versatile in that regard. And since, again, if you're placing this out of play, that doesn't affect any sort of dead pile, because again, it's just a follower. It doesn't affect any sort of dead pile. You can replay them. You can do this as many times as you need to do. So that's a nice effect there. So there's your 3 copies of Deagle to get your artifacts and possessions. So that is the followers in the deck. Then the next thing we have is our artifacts and possessions. So this is probably I think the coolest part of the deck. First, we play Gandalf's Staff. Pretty straightforward. It's just an artifact, so in that regard, it doesn't, anything that affects a possession doesn't affect it, and it gives you this extra vitality, which is really nice to have on your Gandalf. Then the next thing we have is we do have 2 copies of the Beorning Axe. Got these both in Masterwork. This is one that's a very hard to find card. But basically what this does is you put it on Grimbeorn, and when he wins a skirmish, you take a Gandalf card from your discard pile into your hand. And so again, guys, that is a Gandalf card. That is not a Gandalf event, so that gets you anything, including, other possessions, including Barliman Butterburs. So it's a very versatile card to just get back anything you need from your discard pile. And it's really a kind of fantastic unfair combo. I don't know of anything else that has that level of broad recursion. So like in the PC expanded format, for example, this has been errated to only let it get events. But in this standard, I shouldn't say standard, in this regular expanded format, you still are, there's no errata on this, and you're able to get any Gandalf card that you want. So this is just an absolutely just fantastic card for play, and just a beautiful card to own. Then the next thing we have is Glomdring Foehammer, just a weapon for Gandalf. But again, the nice effect is when he wins a skirmish, you may remove a burden. So that synergizes extremely well with your Gandalf Powerful Guide, because Gandalf Powerful Guide adds burdens, and then Foehammer can remove them for winning a skirmish. Next item we have here, or possession I should say, is we do have 2 copies of the Radagast Herb Bag. Again, beautiful Gandalf masterwork here. And what this does is, this is really one of your key cards in the deck, is each time you play a spell, you may exert Bearer to wound a minion. So this has the same synergy that we had with Gandalf, where spell equals wound. It's just that here you get an exertion instead of a burden to do that. So so the whole idea here is combining this ability with the Powerful Guide's ability, and then every time you play a spell, you get 2 wounds by having the herb bag around. And again, nice boosts there specifically for the vitality. I love any foil cards that have the vitality foiled. I think that just looks fantastic when you get the foiling on the vitality and the resistance there at the bottom. But yeah, 2 Radagast's herb bags. And last 2 possessions here. This is actually my favorite LOTR card, Shadowfax, Greatest of the Miras. And again, this is the beautiful Masterwork foil. Unfortunately, this is a set 17. Those other ones we're looking at were set 18, so they're a little easier to find. Set 17 Masterworks are incredibly difficult to find, and so this is a very, very rare card to come by. But my favorite card in LOTR is this Shadowfax with the Gandalf border, because you just see the white of the coat, the white of Shadowfax, and the white of the clean Gandalf border, and then all of the vitality symbols I was just talking about. Sorry for gushing over this card, but I just in particular love this card. But also for gameplay, again, I mentioned this goes on any wizard, so this can go on Gandalf or Radagast. And this effect is nice to know. There's a ruling on this that it says discard all possessions on bearer, and bearer may not bear a hand weapon. So how that works is, for example, let's say you're putting this on Gandalf, and Gandalf already has a Glomdring. Well, if you put this on here, then it would trigger the thing that says discard other possessions on bearer. You'd have to discard Glomdring, and you couldn't replay it because it says bearer may not bear a hand weapon. But the interesting thing is, let's look at it like with an herb bag. So let's say that, let's leave the herb bag off and say, okay, I've got Shadowfax on Gandalf. When it comes down, it discards all possessions. So that's like the enter the battlefield. It immediately discards all possessions on bearer. And then it just has the clause, bearer may not bear a hand weapon. Well, the herb bag is not a hand weapon. It's just a possession. So as long as Shadowfax is already down, you can add an herb bag onto Gandalf, and that's okay, because this discard all possessions is not a static ability. That's an ability that only triggers upon entering the battlefield. So basically, you can do this if you do it in the right order. If you go Shadowfax first, herb bag second, that's okay. If you go herb bag first, Shadowfax second, that's a problem, because then Shadowfax will trigger and say discard all other possessions and would knock the herb bag off. So that's an important to know how you place those on your companions. And then obviously it's very important to just know that you do have Radagast here too, that can hold a Shadowfax, because that goes on any wizard. And you also have Radagast can also hold his own herb bag, of course, because that also just goes on a wizard. So both of those two cards are interchangeable onto either of your wizards. Just be aware of that triggered ability on Shadowfax for when it enters and makes you discard all possessions, as well as the ongoing ability that whoever holds Shadowfax cannot bear a Glomdring. And Glomdring can only go in Gandalf. So hopefully that all made sense. I know that was a bit of a detailed rules interaction, but that's one of the things that does come up with this Shadowfax. And like I said, it's a fantastic card, so you definitely want to know how to use it. Then the very last possession is Sting the Elven Long Knife. So this is bearer must be Frodo or Bilbo, but you don't have Bilbo. And its effect is exert bearer to remove a threat. So we kind of talked about our earlier interaction about how Frodo and the Gaffer can heal each other every turn, resulting in one net healing to Frodo. What can you do with that net healing is you can remove a threat with it. So exert Frodo to remove a threat. So then basically that allows you to have a threat removal tool. It allows your healing tool of Frodo and Gaffer to turn into a threat removal tool. And then also, again, just a nice power and vitality boost on Frodo to use the Elven Long Knife. And again, I think that looks really cool together there. And I failed to mention, as I was gushing about Shadowfax, failed to mention the other very key text on here is add a threat to remove a burden. So here, as we saw, the Elven Long Knife removes threats, Shadowfax adds threats. So again, the Elven Long Knife can be used to balance out, to remove the threats that Shadowfax incurred, and Shadowfax is you're going to be removing the burdens. That's very key in this deck because, again, if you remember on Gandalf, Gandalf is adding burdens. When you play a spell, add a burden to wound a minion. So this deck has so much interaction of adding burdens, exerting, healing, removing threats, removing burdens. It's just, you have to really be aware of what all your cards can do, because there are a lot of healing and removal loops involved, and you want to know which loops you can access depending on which cards are on the table for you. So then moving on into our conditions, we have quite a few conditions in this deck. The first of which is we do have 2 copies of the long-stemmed pipe. Now, when you look at this on its face, doesn't seem like a very good card. It costs 2, and when you play it, you can put a Gandalf card in your discard pile from your draw deck. Very unique, odd ability, but that's what you have it for, is the ability to search your deck for any Gandalf card and put it in your discard pile. Well, why is that key? Because again, we looked at Barliman can get back any events from your discard pile. So use this to put an event in your discard pile and then get it with Barliman. And then, as we also saw, the Beorning Axe can get any Gandalf card from your discard pile. So there's huge synergies there. And you'll see also there's synergies with pulling this card so that we can put an event in our discard pile to get it back with Barliman. So we've got 2 of those. Then we have Perspective, one of the cards that has received Decipher Errata. So if you see how this is printed, and again, printed is not how it is played because this has an errata. It says, add 2 threats and spot a wizard to prevent a shadow player from using special abilities on shadow cards. So originally, as printed, this blanked all special abilities on all shadow cards, which is obviously absurd. So the errata is still playable, but what the errata does is it prevents a shadow player from using the special ability on a single minion. So rather than all shadow cards, it was reduced to just 1 minion. But why this is so big is, in particular, Ullair and Kea, who if you go up to 6 people in your fellowship is going to crucify you and take out your best companion, this prevents him from doing that. So if your opponent shows an Inkea, you just add 2 threats to cancel it. So it's huge to be able to have that on table. And most likely if you have it on table, they just won't even show Inkea because they know they're just going to spend 6 Twilight and not really get the effect that they're desiring. So that is a huge card. And again, this is a condition. Conditions are going to be pullable by a card you'll see here later on in our deck in the event section for Smeagol. We'll walk you through how to do that. So the next condition here is Watch and Wait. Win a skirmish to remove a burden. So very similar effect to like what we had on Glomdring, except for this can go on any companion. So you can put this on Treebeard or Grimbeorn. Then we have our Scouring of the Shire. So this is really actually in here just to protect the next card that you'll see. It's just a 0 cost condition that prevents your opponent from being able to discard your Shire conditions. And the Shire condition we're trying to protect is Shadow Play. So Shadow Play works great with those Unbound Hobbits, or can with Frodo, to basically when your opponent plays a minion, you can exert your Hobbit to exert the minion. So it really gets a lot of wounds down pretty easily by exerting characters who have high vitality, who don't really have a lot of other function otherwise. Then Don't Look at Them. This is another movie block era combo, I would say. But basically the combo is with your Smeagol Always Helps, can add 2 threats to an exhaust a minion. And then if you have this Don't Look at Them condition down, you can discard 3 cards from hand to wound a minion. So between those 2 cards, Smeagol exhausts, and Don't Look at Them finishes them off with the last wound. So just that one, it's really a 1-card combo because you're already starting Smeagol. That 1-card combo allows you to take out your opponent's best minion, unless they have some kind of wound prevention. So that's huge. That's a, like I said, combo from the movie block era that was enabled because those are both cards from, this card's from Ents and this card's from Return of the King. So moving on then to the final 2 conditions here, both also Smeagol conditions. We have Follow Smeagol, which allows us to exert Smeagol to play the Fellowship's next site. That's huge. We'll look briefly at our site path, but in expanded, being able to control the site path is just huge because the sites can be incredibly overpowered. And we'll look at what some of the interactions you can get with that are when we look at our sites. And finally, the Gladden Homestead, again, just to help with some condition control out of the Smeagol culture. I should say not culture, because technically not a culture if you know the rule on that as well, but from Smeagol. All right, almost done to the end here. We're into our last suit, which is our events. And we start off with this beauty, 4 copies of A Wizard is Never Late. Again, really nice foil from Fellowship. And this allows us to play a Gandalf character from our draw deck. So early on, huge to, pull out your powerful guide. And also, as I stated, Barliman is a character, so you can use this also to pull a Barliman Butterbur. That's an important function to know. It's also an important function to know that Barliman can get this back, because Barliman, you can exert him to take a Gandalf event from your discard pile into your hand. So there's a lot of synergy there where these pull Barliman, but Barliman also pulls these back out of the discard. Then we have some situational events. The first one is Deep in Thought, to discard all shadow conditions if you can spot Gandalf and 4 Twilight tokens. So obviously the pool needs to be a little more full, but when you have that, very good to just drop all the shadow conditions. Then we have Keep Your Forked Tongue. This is, again, a more of a situational card, but a very fantastic one. Spot Gandalf and 3 Twilight tokens to prevent all wounds to a companion who has the Gandalf signet. So who is that in this deck? That's going to be, obviously, your Frodo I mentioned earlier, has the Gandalf signet, as well as your Radagast has the Gandalf signet as well. And I want to say there might have been one more, but off the top of my head, those are your two guys that have the requisite signet that you need for that. And so one cool trick to know of with that is it's the same trick as the Gimli's Helm trick, which is that you can prevent all wounds to a companion, and then you can assign all of the threat wounds to them. Because those wounds never go through, you can just keep assigning all of the threat wounds, and all the threat wounds get removed. So this is a nice way you can just, in one go, get rid of all the threats. Or you can just use it to, keep someone alive as needed with that signet. Then the other card that's very similar to the A Wizard is Never Late is we do have 4 copies of the Momentous Gathering. So the Momentous Gathering is different because it only allows you to get companions. It doesn't allow you to get allies. But if you can spot 2 Ents, you can take a companion and a condition into hand from your draw deck. So that's a really cool synergy with those Merry and Pippins that we looked at earlier on, because these guys are 2 Ents. So right there you spot 2 Ents. And then obviously we do have some other Ents in the deck too, but you definitely meet the spot requirement for 2 Ents. So you can use this to take any Gandalf companion and any Gandalf condition. So obviously the huge ones to go for there are those ones we were just reviewing, specifically Perspective to keep Enkea off of you. But then once you have that, you can do the Remove a Burden one or whatever you need at the time. So that's a nice synergy there. Again, a couple things to be aware of the differences between Wizard is Never Late and Momentous Gathering. Wizard is Never Late, in addition to the targets. The difference here is this plays the character from your draw deck, so that does not count against your rule of 4 for drawing or taking cards into hand. This does take cards into your hand, so that is something you want to be aware of, especially if you take a companion and a condition. That's 2 cards right there of your 4. So you're probably not going to want to burn a companion on the turn in which you play a Momentous Gathering, because then you're going to be over 4, because you're going to get 3 cards into hand from the Save from the Fire, and this would be 2 off the Momentous Gathering, so you'd be over your limit if you did that. Or you could do like 2 Momentous Gatherings in a turn would be your 4 cards right there. So be aware of the rule of 4 as you're using Momentous Gathering. But Wizard is Never Late is not subject to that. Then the next few cards here, again, another situational one is Spot Gandalf to discard a possession or artifact. That's the Roll of Thunder. And then this is the card I've been talking about all along, Save from the Fire. This is huge in the deck. We've already talked about a lot of the interactions with this and how this is primarily going to be used to set up your Gandalf Fellowship and get all those key cards that you need. There is only 1 copy of this, so this is going to be a huge target for you to go after with those long-stemmed pipes. So long-stem pipe can search your deck for a Gandalf card and put it in the discard pile. You can discard the Save from the Fire, and then your 4 Barlimans that you have can just get that back as many times as you need to. And that's really the tech of taking multiple burns if you need to. This deck does have, enough cards too for the Hobbit culture that you can burn a Hobbit. We looked at those 2 Hobbit allies, Sting, and the 2 conditions for Hobbits. So you've got, I think, 5 Hobbit cards in there. So you definitely can feel free to burn burn one of your Hobbit characters too to do a burn off of Hobbits, but for the most part, you're going to be burning to get, Grimbeorn and his axe, or Treebeard, or some of your key powerful guide, Shadowfax, some of the card, herb bag, the cards to set up your primary Gandalf strategy. Then the final few things we're getting into are our spells. So we do have this absolute staple and absolute beautiful Lord of the Rings card, the Servant of the Secret Fire. So this is 4 copies of this, just a fantastic card. You know what it does, reduce a minion by 3, but also it is a spell. So that triggers the herb bag and the powerful guide, and it's a Gandalf event for all the things that affect that. So beautiful, fantastic card. Then in terms of your next spell, we do have 4 copies of the Strength of Spirit. This is kind of an unknown card, but what it does is it's basically a spell that can be played in response to preventing an exertion. So anytime you'd have an exertion, whether it's shadow play, whether it's Radagast's herb bag, whether it's something else that would cause an exertion, you can play this to prevent that exertion. And then, of course, you don't place a token for that exertion, but you do trigger by playing a spell. So then any of your things that, whether it's herb bag or whether it's Gandalf himself, you do get a spell trigger off of these to wound a minion off of Gandalf, wound a minion off of the herb bag. So tons of synergy there. And then one of the techs, of course, with wounding minions is if you can wound minions completely to death as they're played, which you can with shadow play plus those wounds, then you can actually keep those minions off the table altogether and they don't get their enter the battlefield ability. So it's not like Magic where when a character enters the battlefield, the trigger goes on the stack, and that even if you remove the character, the trigger still resolves. It's the opposite of that. It's the discard when played rule, which basically says if you discard a minion when it's played, it never gets its trigger for being played. So that's important to know. If you have a minion that you really don't want hitting the battlefield, you can wound it to death before it even hits. So for site manipulation, we do have 2 copies of Speak, Friend, and Enter. We already had the condition with Smeagol, but for Gandalf event, we have Speak, Friend, and Enter, which plays the next site during the Fellowship or Regroup. So that's kind of your standard site replacement effect. And then we have 1 copy of the Travel Leader. That's the one where you can actually replace any site in the region during the maneuver phase. And so we'll look at our sites here now, but there's a lot of manipulations that you can do with that. I won't give you the full on that. I see this is already going tremendously long, so I'll just give you some very basic synergies on the site stuff. And last but not least, a very key card in the deck, we have 2 copies of Something Slimy. So Something Slimy is a card that you can pull off of the Damned Gate stream at the start of the game, and then it will allow you to get any condition from your deck. So you have to spot Smeagol to be able to play it, but then you don't have to just get a Smeagol condition, you can get any condition. So all of those Gandalf conditions we were looking at, those Shire conditions, you can get whatever you need to put together for your deck to put all the pieces together. So this is huge, absolutely huge to have that for the pulling. So you can use Something Slimy to pull even something like a long-stemmed pipe to pull an event that you need. So there's a lot of ways that one card in your deck can basically turn into any other card that you need. And that's what's fantastic about this deck, is just the absolute versatility of looking at your hand and having just so many options of what do I need and what are the different ways that I can get it. And there probably is a way you can get what you need. So just looking at the sites here then very quickly before I let you guys go. This is our site path here. And more or less, we have the Damned Gate stream that I was just mentioning. Why that's important is you can start that and play a Gollum or Smeagol Free People's card from your draw deck at the start of your Fellowship phase. So that's a great one to start to pull that Something Slimy with and get yourself going. Then some of these are for Shadow, of course. Nothing special here. This is, it's special, but it's nothing for your Fellowship. The Nazgul discard a condition site, Cavern Entrance again to blank skirmish abilities. Neekerbreekers Bog is great because as long as you have 1 burden or less, then you can heal all your companions. So that's a huge, huge healing site. So you can always recur sites like this and heal yourself. And if your opponent's dumb enough to get a couple burdens on them, you can start wounding them. So this is just a fantastic expanded site that you just see all the time. Absolute staple. Another absolute staple is this is the site that you play on your opponent's sanctuaries, and it actually cancels the sanctuary. So that's again, the PC errated this to not be able to do that, but Decipher never did. So if you're playing Decipher Expanded, which this deck is for, you can actually drop this on your opponent's sanctuary and they cannot heal at their own sanctuary. So that's ridiculous, where you can come in, heal yourself and then substitute this out later so that they can't heal, you know, with something like a traveled leader or whatnot. Or if you just don't need to heal, you can just play it down there. So that's a ridiculous card. Absolutely ridiculous. Then this one is kind of the opposite. This is the one of you heal each of your characters when you move to this site. So again, if you need repeated healing, Mithlond will give that to you. Falls of Rauros. I think you guys know this card, and showing off the foil here a little bit just for the flex. But that's the one that I was mentioning about removing characters from the dead pile. So you play this in Region 2, you remove the characters from the dead pile as needed. So you basically can play your 10th companion, or you can replay a Gandalf. So beautiful card there. This one's not in amazing shape, but still beautiful. Beautiful rare card there. Anyone who knows about the game knows that this is one of the rarest cards out there. Not in particular because it's a great, fantastic card, just because it's rare. And we have Mount Doom, where if you get your site path set the way you want and you don't want your opponent screwing with it, you can put this down, and then sites in the region cannot be replaced. And finally, the Sirannon Ruins is just to have that big number up there if you need to play something bigger. So that's our site path. And like I said, tons of site manipulation in this deck between Speak Friend and Enter, Traveled Leader, and our Smeagol site replacer. So we have many options to manipulate the site path. Well, guys, thanks for listening. This is probably the funnest video I've ever done. Also the longest video I've ever done. So thank you for bearing with me through all of that. And I'm just going to show off some of the absolute beautiful cards here for our thumbnail as I close us up here. But yeah, I had a lot of fun going through this deck. This was a labor of love that took me quite some time to assemble all of this, but I'm really happy that I have it. It's a beautiful deck, just a beautiful showcase of the expanded format and of all the things that you can really do with having access to the entire card pool. So there's some of my favorite cards there, just showing off in the middle there, some of those foils. And hopefully you enjoyed the eye candy, and hopefully you did enjoy some of the in-depth explanation here. This video's going on 47 minutes. So appreciate you watching. Appreciate anyone who stuck through with me to the end of the video. If you did, shout out to you. And hopefully you enjoyed the expanded deck tech as well as the eye candy. So if you like these videos, definitely give me a shout out. Let me know. I'm having a lot of fun doing this. So let me know if you want to see more like this, and I'd be happy to oblige. Thanks, everyone.